Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of FinServ Tech Oracles. Jerry and I have just been on vacation, so we're both coming back refreshed and energized. I'm Jonna Till Johnson. I'm here with my oracular colleague, Jerry Murphy, to share our thoughts on technology for FinServ companies. And Jerry, for this episode, you did think about this and plan it. You wanted to discuss the great open versus proprietary software debate for FinServ companies. So let's start with some basics. What's the real difference between open source software and proprietary software, and why should financial services firms care?
Well, the real difference is in open source, theoretically, you as a developer have complete access to the code. So you can actually see the source code, both of the operating system as well as the applications. All the code is available to you, so you can see whether there's anything hidden in there. And then you could also then theoretically enhance or develop it yourself, whether you want to enhance literally the operating system that your application is sitting on, or the application itself. So where proprietary, of course, is something that's coming from a third-party vendor like Microsoft with its various flavors of Windows operating systems through the years, where of course they're not telling you at all what's inside of there. You just get the ones and zeros, and you have to trust that what's in there is going to work well for you in no malicious way, and it's going to make all your requirements.
Well, and so speaking of trust, let me jump in. I know this has been a topic of ongoing concern for the folks at the Wall Street Technology Association, for example, where, as you know, we both participate, and I'm the content committee chair. So I know this is something that gets raised every year. Which is security better with open source or better with proprietary? Because I've heard it both ways. And over the past several years, there have been some real vulnerabilities that have made their way through open source, as well as, you mentioned Microsoft. My Lord, practically every vulnerability on the MITRE ATT&CK matrix seems to be associated with Microsoft.
Okay, and like most responses, this will sound completely wishy-washy, but it honestly, they both have different aspects of security, right? So the open source, you could argue, well, the criminals can have access to that code the same way everybody else does, so they have an ability to know in detail to find exploits. The other side of that, of course, is that you have more people can look at it to find patches for it. Where on the proprietary, you could say it's security through obscurity if somebody can't see it and they have to reverse engineer it. On the other hand, if that's the source of many zero-day attacks, is when somebody does find an exploit, it might take longer to find and fix it because nobody can know sort of a priori what it is within that stack that they're actually attacking.
Yeah, and I guess my sense has always been, on average, I would give the thumbs up to open source with all the awareness of vulnerabilities that there are, and that's certainly if you have the resources, which I think is something we'll talk about in a second. But if you are ready, willing, and able to vet your open source software intensively and hammer it from a cybersecurity perspective, it seems to me that you're actually better positioned with open source because you can't do the same thing to Microsoft or any other vendors. That would be my read. But
I absolutely agree, because you're right. It's like it's out there, and so you think about it. There's these extensive beta environments, if you will, right? Because it's have at it, so you can have a bunch of different people pounding it, and amazingly, for no money, lots of people do just that. So it is.
Well, I meant very specifically, if you're a financial services firm, you don't count on the open source community to do your job. You will actually pound on it rigorously as well, in addition to.
And the other thing is, you can then take that and you can make your own, modifications to that yourself to serve your own purposes too. So if there's some known identified thing, you could actually make a tweak to that yourself.
Exactly. So it seems like you have more freedom and flexibility with open source. But the downside is, this is assuming you've got armies of programmers that are adept in cybersecurity to slam it. So
and that's one of my big issues with it, is if you're a large, right, if you're one of the big 5 or 10 financial services firms out there, it definitely makes sense, because you can, in fact, have an army of people. You can have people dedicated just to beta and test things, both unit testing, integration tests, stress tests. You can do all of that with an army of people. If you're a much smaller firm, you don't have that luxury. So it's probably going to pull you more towards something that there is going to be a vendor out there to support. Even when you're using something as open as Linux, let's just forget the application. If you're talking about the operating system, the thing is, you can have your own sort of custom version of it, but again, you're much more likely to go with Red Hat or something that there's actually a third-party vendor that can actually support that if you're having an issue. And so that the smaller companies are going to need, one, they're not going to have the expertise to do it. Second, they're going to need somebody out there to do the supporting. So the smaller you are, the more you're probably going to be leaned towards using something that is supportable, which is probably going to lean you towards proprietary stuff.
Well, let me throw you a little wild card, because I think we can agree that smaller companies should probably go towards off the shelf with all that entails. Yeah. What about the trade-off between open source and entirely proprietary software? Because I know a lot of the large financial services firms take great pride in writing their own code, and would be insulted if you suggested that they use anybody else's code, because that's their competitive differentiator. So how do you decide when to use open source and when to write your own?
Well, I think when I look at that, I would lean towards sticking with the open source, probably for the operating system platform. I mean, financial services firms aren't writing their own operating systems.
Yeah, fair enough.
Unlikely, right? But they're certainly going to write their own proprietary applications that are sitting on top of that. So that's where I'd make the differentiation. And then for the smaller people, increasingly, you're really going towards, as far as even code itself, you're not even necessarily buying code. Increasingly, you're getting software as a service, right? You're actually getting to a third party who's actually not even giving you the source code. They're literally giving you the application as a service that you're buying. If you're really small and you're going to be using a Fiserv, Jack Henry, some third party person like that, so that's even another degree removed from the code that way.
Well, and I would also say smaller firms, and particularly things like credit unions, their competitive differentiator isn't that they have the best software out there. Their competitive differentiator is that they know their customers and give the best customer service. So, exactly. Okay, well, that was actually really interesting, Jerry. That's it for us until next week. Thanks for watching or listening. Please remember you can register for the entire series online, and please do that. And tune in next week at 0900 for the next episode of FinServ Tech Oracles, right before the markets open on Tuesdays. Take care.
See you later.